Okay, the meeting is now recording, so I'll now take the sederant for the meeting of the Finance and Corporate Resources Committee on Wednesday the 30th of October 2024. I can see that we have present Councillor Allison, Councillor Brogan, Councillor Matthew Buchanan, Councillor Carmichael, Councillor Chalmers. I have apologies from Councillor Cooper. We also have present Councillor Cowan, Councillor Devlin. I have apologies from Councillor Donnelly, and we have Councillor Dewar substituting for her. I have apologies from Councillor Fagan. We have present Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Ferguson Miller, Councillor Handybode, Councillor Horn, Councillor Hose, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Hugh MacDonald, Councillor McClymont, Councillor Leslie MacDonald, Councillor McDougall. Do we have Councillor McGeever? No. We also have Councillor Nelson, Councillor Razak, Councillor Ross, Councillor Scott and Councillor Williams. There are also a number of officers present today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, don't see any declarations of interest. Can we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 21st of August? Oh, sorry, Councillor Loudon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, it was just on the point about declaration of interest, and it was to declare an interest. I'm just checking the number again for you to be helpful. On item number 9 on Scottish Teacher Pension Scheme, having been a member of that scheme.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it noted. Minutes of the previous meeting on the 21st of August. Can these be approved as a correct record? Thank you. Next item is revenue budget monitoring, pages 15 to 26 in your pack. And Lorraine, can I ask you to speak to this report, please?
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Item 3 then on page 15 is the first of 2 financial monitoring reports covering revenue and capital. So this one is the revenue report for 24-25 for the resource, and as noted in section 3.2, Appendix A provides a service analysis statement outlining the key highlights by service for the resource, and Appendix B goes on to provide the detailed financial position with variance explanations by budget category for the resource as a whole. Any variance explanations and proposed budget variants are then shown where relevant in Appendices C to D, so that's across the individual services of the resource, and they also show the actual spend as at the 9th of August 2024, and also for the current year, the expected outturn forecast on spend and income. So in section 5 then, we detail the financial implications themselves. Section 5.2 specifically notes that as at the 9th of August, the resources projected outturn position for the financial year 24-25 is break-even, and we will continue to refine that as we move throughout the year. Variants are proposed, as I mentioned, in the individual appendices across the service areas, both within the resource and from other resources. And on that basis, I'm just looking to refer members back to recommendation 2 and ask that the projected break-even position on the resources budget for the year as detailed in Appendix B be noted, and also that the proposed budget variants be approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Councillor Ferguson Miller, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. My question is on page 17, and it's the second table, the explanation for projected outturn variances, and under the personnel, it reads there's an anticipated overspend in payments to other bodies relating to medical costs due to demand. Is this referring to medical for employees, where employees are referred for occupational health, etc.?
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson Miller. Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's based on the level of demand that's been required from employees, and the personnel budget picks up the cost for that. Thank you.
Do we have any? Sorry.
I have a second question. Does that cover? Is that cost cover council-wide, or is it only for finance and corporate?
Thanks to it's council-wide. There is an element of the budget that we recharge to the other resources, but there's also a part that we retain within personnel, and that part there is council-wide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? No. Can we approve the report? Thank you. Moving on, capital budget monitoring, pages 27 to 30 in your report. Again, it's back to you, Lorraine, please.
Thank you. So the second monitoring report on the financial side is, as you say, the capital monitoring report. It's the second capital monitoring report for the current financial year. And in section 3, we note the total budget of 3.086 million, and there's been no change to that budget since we last reported to committee. Section 5 then details the financial position, and in section 5.1 we note the budget for the year of 3.086 million. Section 5.2 notes the forecast for the year is the 3.086 million, so we're expecting a full spend at the moment. For your information, actual expenditure to the 9th of August is 1.073 million, and the detail of that is in Appendix A. So again, if I could ask members to refer to section 2 and ask that the Finance and Corporate Resources Capital Programme of 3.086 million and the forecast expenditure of 3.086 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any comments or questions, please? I don't see any. Can we approve the report? Thank you. Workforce monitoring, July to September, pages 31 to 38. Eileen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standard workforce monitoring report prepared by Personnel Services for Finance and Corporate Resources, and it's covering the period July to September 2022. So in section 4.1, that outlines the attendance statistics, and the resource absence figure for September was 3.2%. It's increased by 0.6 compared to the previous month, and is 2.9% lower than the council-wide figure. And then compared to September 2023, the absence figure has decreased by 0.7%. Moving on, in terms of section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2. And during the period, there was 30 employees that were referred for occupational health. There were no accidents or incidents recorded during the period. And similarly, there were no discipline, grievance or dignity at work issues during the period. At 4.5, in terms of the analysis of leavers, there were 4 leavers that were eligible for an exit interview, and we're still collating some of the information in terms of exit interviews as part of the move to Fusion, and that will catch up at the next period for reporting. I'm referring committee back to section 2, and I'm asking that the workforce monitoring information for finance and corporate resources covering the period July to September is noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Do we have any comments or questions? No, I don't see any comments or questions. Can we agree to approve the report? Thank you. Council-wide workforce monitoring, and that's from July to September. And it's back to you, Eileen, please.
Thank you. So this is now the standard workforce monitoring report, but this now covers the whole of the council. This is the council-wide workforce monitoring, covering the same period. It's July to September 2024. So paragraph section 4.1, in terms of maximising attendance, you'll see that the council figure average for the period is 6.1, and it's an increase of 1.4 from the previous month, and then an increase of 0.8% when compared to September 2023. And in terms of looking at all the figures, that translates to a projected annual absence rate for the financial year 2024 for the council of 5.6%. There's further breakdowns in comparison to the previous years within the appendices, but you'll see that musculoskeletal and psychological conditions remain the main reasons for absence, and there's also a more detailed breakdown in terms of the number of days attributed to each absence reason. Members will be aware that managers continue to follow the absence procedures, and including all the supports for the employees to remain at work and to return to work as soon as possible. Support is also provided by the personnel teams through meetings through line managers and resource management teams, on the basis making sure, as I say, the appropriate supports are in place, and in addition that the appropriate actions are taken. At section 5, in terms of occupational health referrals, there was 318 employees referred for a medical examination. There was 413 employees that attended physiotherapy during the period, and 70% of them remained at work while they received treatment. There was 340 employees that were referred to the Employee Support Officer, and there was 150 referrals to the PAM Assist Counselling Service, and there was 21 employees that were referred for CBT during the period. For accidents and incidents, over the period for the whole council, there was 305 accidents and incidents recorded, and as I indicated as part of my update at the previous report, there has been a delay in terms of categorising some of these accidents and incidents, and that's just down to the transition and the move over to Oracle Fusion. So 130 of these the accidents have been investigated, and 175 are still in the process of the investigation, and the categorisation will come for them. In terms of moving on then to paragraph 7, in terms of discipline, grievance and dignity at work, there was 32 disciplinary hearings during the period. There was no appeals that were heard during the period. There was 5 grievances that were raised, and there was 10 dignity at work cases raised, and 1 referral for mediation. In terms of leavers and exit interviews, due to the transitions to Fusion and the timings of terminations in the period, this had an impact on the exit interview and information being captured and available, and that will be collated and be available for the next period. Turnover for the council for the period was 1.5%, and there was 219 leavers eligible for an exit interview. And like I say, the exit interview information is still being collated. So based on the figure at September 2024, the annual absence labour turnover figure for the financial year will be 4.8%. In terms of recruitment monitoring, there was 2,048 applications received, and of that there was 2,013 monitoring forms that were completed. So we had 62 applicants that declared themselves as disabled, 20 of them were shortlisted and 3 were appointed. There was 232 applicants of a black ethnic minority background, 41 were shortlisted and 2 were appointed. And then of the 18 applicants who declared themselves as veterans, 4 were shortlisted and 1 was appointed. So, and finally, in terms of Staff and Watch, there's been an increase of 64 employees in post from March 2024 until June 2024, as detailed in Appendix 15. So I'm referring committee back to section 2 within the report, and I'm asking that committee approve the recommendation to note the employment information for the council covering the period July to September 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen, for a very concise report. Councillor, just bear with me, please. Ferguson Miller.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on the occupational health. I noticed that there is a decrease in the figures for finance and corporate and for the council wide. I think the only increase was the PAM Assist counselling, which was 11 people, which doesn't seem significant. There was a significant increase in August, and I'm just wondering, are you seeing this now starting to pan out? Because I know that there is an overspend, and I'm just wondering if you believe it will pan out, given there's such a significant drop this month.
Eileen, please.
Yeah, we're certainly not attributing any drop in direct correlation to the spending, as Lorraine had already explained. Some of that is recharged out to resources, so that's not something, there's certainly not any kind of curb, if you like, in terms of occupational health referrals. They just carry on as usual. It may well be there's been a bit of a laggard reporting that's attributed to Fusion, just in terms of actions being recorded and then how they're pulled down So I can certainly have a look at that, but I don't understand it, as I say, to be attributed to the financial report that was reported earlier.
Oh, sorry, is it the way I've maybe put the question across? I noticed at the August committee there was significant increases in each category, you know, for the musculoskeletal, the physiotherapy treatment. And I noticed that this month there has been some decreases. And I was just wondering if you're starting to see it maybe pan out a bit.
Eileen, please.
Yeah, in terms of the detail of that, I would need to look a bit closer at the figures, councillors, and I'm happy to have a look at that, and I can come back to you with a fuller response.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 58, there's Appendix 14 there. There's two tables, as you can see, and looking at comparing last year to this year's figures, it's quite interesting to see that you've got the disability group, the black and minority ethnic, and the veterans. The comparison in numbers from last year to this year is huge, as in the number of people applying for jobs. Is there any reason for those numbers and the drop of numbers?
Eileen, please.
Although, again, in terms of the detail, I don't have the detail to hand, but I'm happy to have a look at that and then come back to you. I mean, I think in general we're seeing more people applying, and I think that's probably just attributed to the different ways in terms of the recruitment routes that we're opening up. But as I say, in terms of the characteristics that are detailed there, I'm happy to have a look at them and again get back to you with further analysis.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Is that okay, Councillor Ferguson? Yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson Miller, please.
Chair, I was just wondering if the council still are accredited to double tick. Personnel, it's not my forte, so I'm not sure what's going on in the world of personnel and local government. But I was just wondering if the council were still accredited to that.
Yeah, the scheme is currently now called Disability Confident, and we are accredited to that. So you'll see it on our recruitment correspondence, on all our advertising, and then indeed in all council correspondence. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Back to Councillor, oh no, sorry. Any other comments or questions?
Morning.
No.
Chair.
Mo, sorry.
Thank you. That's going to page 58 again about the recruitment figures, and I'm following on from Councillor's earlier question about the fall in number of applications from 572 to 232. But the figures that alarm me is the fact that the success rate of the percentage interviewed is still very low for black ethnic minority applicants at 5% compared to white applicants 27%, and last year it was 4% and 18% for white. So I have emailed this concern because this is a pattern that doesn't seem to be getting addressed, even though a lot of work has been done on this. And I'm raising my concerns because I think we maybe need to do more on this now, because this has been going on for a number of years now, and I've not seen the pattern change at all in the terms I've been serving, and I'm starting to get alarmed about this.
Okay. Eileen, do you want to respond to Councillor Razak?
Yeah, I know that we had provided some figures previously in terms of some analysis in terms of the recruitment monitoring, and I'm happy to have a further look at that and provide them for you. There's also obviously ongoing work in terms of the new Equalities Forum that's been established. I appreciate what you're saying, but I can certainly provide, as I say, more in terms of the work that continues to be ongoing in this area.
Chair? I know it's historically we were told that it's down to the figures, minority figures were 4% in the previous census in 2011, but they've gone up to 7.1%. And even when you caveat that into the employment figures, it's still concerning reading more than anything else. And I think South Lanarkshire councils need to seriously have a look at this and address this, because I think this will become a bigger matter now.
Thank you. So this, as you said, is the second quarterly report for Treasury Management activity for the current financial year. It's the regular report that you'll be used to seeing, and in Section 4 we're just giving you a little bit of an update there on the base rate position. Section 5 provides you with details of debt management and borrowing, and in Table 1 we show the position in terms of the borrowing for the year so far. We haven't taken any borrowing so far, and we're using our cash balances to fund capital spend, but we do acknowledge that we will have to replace that with borrowing as we move forward. Investment activities detailed in Section 6 of the report, and that's all about where we deposit our funds. So prior to depositing any funds, we make sure that the institutions that we are working with are considered safe. We also make sure we can access the funds when necessary and that they're working as best they can for the council. As I mentioned, part of the deposit methodology includes consideration of credit ratings and rating watches, as well as working with our financial advisors. Table 2 then shows you where we've deposited our money so far this year to the end of September, and it's similar to previous reports. So as usual, we've deposited most of our funds in UK Government Deposit Facility and other local authorities, with the balance being made in the Bank of Scotland call account for ease of access to funds. Section 7 of the report continues the theme of managing risk and notes that the annual investment strategy that was approved back in February detailed how risk is managed and what investments we are permitted to make. So tables 3 to 5 of your report provide details of deposits and credit ratings to, again, the end of September. And as usual, we are looking to use counterparties of very high credit quality. Section 8 covers the plans for the next quarter of the year, and this will really be more of the same in terms of the approach that we take. Deposits will continue to be placed with institutions where the ratings are consistent with the Council's approved criteria, and deposits will also continue to be placed with the DMO and UK local authorities. Section 9 of your report covers prudential indicators, and we're required to report on these indicators as we go through the year, and I would just report this afternoon that these are in line with the limits set, so no issues to raise there. If I can refer members back then to Section 2 and ask that the contents of the report are noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Any comments, questions? No? No. Can we agree the report? Thank you. Moving on to Treasury Management Activity and Annual Investment Report, and that's pages 69 to 88 in your report, and it's back to you, Lorraine, please.
Thank you. So item 8 then on page 69 provides an update on 3 areas of Treasury Management activity: the Treasury Management activity for the year that's just passed, the Prudential Code indicators, and also the Annual Investment Strategy. Due to regulations governing each of these 3 areas, we've got different reporting requirements as we go through the committee cycle, and I'll explain that when we look at the recommendations at the end. But in taking you through the report itself then, we note the 3 areas that we will cover in terms of the background. So the first is the Treasury Management activity for the year, and that's required by the Chartered Institute of Finance and Accountancy Code. Secondly, and linked to our borrowing, again, the Prudential Code requires us to report on a series of indicators to demonstrate prudence, sustainability and affordability in relation to our capital financing decisions or our borrowing. And thirdly, the Local Government Investment Scotland Regulations 2010 requires us to prepare an annual investment strategy before the start of the financial year and a report at the end of the year. And this report that I'll talk you through this afternoon is the year-end report for that. There are 3 appendices covering these 3 areas, and we've summarised them in the body of the report. So section 4 firstly looks at the Treasury Management activity for 23-24. That's detailed in Appendix 1. The summary shows it covers our borrowing and deposits for the year, and these are basically in line with the Q4 Treasury Management activity report that we presented to the last committee. This is us just doing a final round-up now that we've cleared off the annual report and accounts and making sure that everything's tying up. Section 5 then looks at the prudential indicators. That looks at capital expenditure and also the borrowing linked to that capital expenditure. One of the indicators sets limits on the level of borrowing that we can incur, and I'd report that within the last, or for the last year rather, we've remained within the limits that we had set. So again, no issues to note there. And lastly, section 6 summarises the position on the investment report, and that's detailed in Appendix 3 of your report. So in that section, we cover deposits, and for the last year, I can report to you that all deposits were in line with the approved lending limits and the approved credit rating criteria. 97% of our deposits were made with counterparty of very high credit rating, and the remaining 3% were with either the Bank of Scotland or the Royal Bank of Scotland. If I can take you back to the recommendations then and just explain the process. So I'd be looking to ask that the Treasury Management Report and the Treasury Management and Prudential Code Indicators Report be noted, and that they're both referred on to the Executive Committee for noting. And then in terms of the annual investment report itself, I'm asking committee to endorse that report and that it is referred on to the Executive Committee prior to being submitted to Council for formal approval. And that's in line with the Local Government Investment Scotland regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Do we have any comments or questions regarding this report? No, I don't see any. None online either. Can we agree the report? Thank you. Moving on to Scottish Public Pensions Agency and consultation on the School Teachers Pension Scheme. Now we have Councillor Loudon who has declared an interest. Can you switch yourself off and we will let you know when this item is finished, please. Okay, thank you very much. And that is back to you. Eileen, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the Scottish Public Pensions Agency consultation as SPPA and the Scottish Teachers Pension Scheme, and give an update to committee in terms of the Council's response on the proposals. And the proposals are specifically around amending the eligibility criteria for membership of the Scottish Teachers Pension Scheme. So in terms of by way of background, the membership of the current scheme is provided for individuals that are employed by a participating employer, and that's that they are predominantly in a teaching role. And the employers include local authorities, colleges, universities, independent schools and special schools. The regulations themselves don't expressly define what a teaching role is, and it's traditionally expected that that would be a frontline teaching role in terms of timetabled classes. However, there are circumstances where other members may be eligible for membership within the scheme, and previously as part of legacy arrangements, that was people that would have been described as organisers or advisors. However, these legacy arrangements closed on the 1st of April 2022, and then the current scheme doesn't have the term advisor. This has meant that there's some areas that require a bit of clarity in terms of membership of the scheme. And for example, currently like executive directors, heads of service and chief officers and some other types of roles are not necessarily eligible to join the scheme, and therefore if someone changes role from a teaching role into one of these other types of roles, they then have to leave the existing teacher scheme and move into the local government scheme, and that can be quite complicated, not only for the individuals but also from an administration point of view. And therefore, in response to this, then there's a consultation document that seeks views on the proposals to potentially extend the criteria for membership to cover these other types of roles that are more reflective of the education picture for now. The consultation runs for a period of 12 weeks. It started on the 23rd of August and it ends on the 15th of November. In terms of the full response from the Council, that's been worked in partnership between Personnel and Education Resources. There's a full response in Appendix 1, but in general it's covering that eligibility for the scheme for all posts detailed in the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers, the SNCT handbook, the extension of the eligibility for those who are moving from a lecturing role where they were a member of the scheme and then into a higher education role, that we consider as secondments as part of inclusion for the STPS eligibility, and consider senior management posts as I've described previously. So in terms of subject to approval, the response will be submitted on the 15th of November to the Scottish Government on behalf of the Council. And with that then I'm referring you back to section 2 and I'm asking that the content of the report in relation to the consultation be noted and that the proposed response as detailed in Appendix 1 be approved for submission by the 15th of November.
Thank you, Eileen. Do we have any comments or questions regarding this report? No, I don't see any. Can we agree it? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on, revenue... Oh, sorry, yes. Can we get Councillor Loudon back, please? That's it. That's Councillor Loudon back with us. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is revenue collection and approval for write-offs, and that's pages 99 to 104. Craig, please, could you read to this report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report advises committee of the collection performance 10th of September, also has an update in respect of the non-domestic rates incentivisation scheme, and then finally it seeks committee approval for write-offs that are detailed in the report. Section 4 details the current collection performance, with further information provided in Appendix 1. In relation to council tax, we are currently ahead of target. For non-domestic rates, we're equal to target, and that's the same position for sundry debt. In relation to arrears that are detailed in Section 5, again, further information provided within the second table of Appendix 1. Council tax is ahead of target, as is non-domestic rates, and sundry debt is currently behind target. Section 6 covers update in respect to the non-domestic rates incentivisation scheme and notes that buoyancy at the end of September 24 was 0.65%, and therefore a further 0.25% is required in the remaining 2 quarters to secure any additional income under the scheme. Section 7 details for committee the proposals for write-offs. This includes council tax and the bulk welfare prescribed debt for financial year 2000-2001, non-domestic rates and also former tenant arrears. If I can refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2, that the performance in respect of collection be noted, the position in respect of the incentivisation scheme also be noted, and the rest idea at point 3 be approved. Thank you, Chair, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Ross, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It was in relation to, I know that we have certain targets for each of the write-offs, and I know that the write-offs don't particularly appertain to a certain particular year, that they actually go back longer than the term. But is there any way that we can have a look at how this year's figures relate to last year's figures, relate to the year before? Is there some way that we can gauge whether the write-off figures are the amount of debt is increasing or decreasing on a staged basis, or is that just too hard to manage? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Craig, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's not that it's too hard to manage. What we do within this report is provide information on collection performance. It obviously includes the comparison to last year as well, to provide that level of detail for members' interest and also scrutiny. We don't typically report to this report on debt levels, but certainly that's something I provide to members separately by way of an update.
Okay. Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Can we agree the report? Agree. Thank you. And moving on to items for noting. Reserve strategies, pages 105 to 112. Lorraine, please.
Thank you. So item 11 then is a report to provide members with the position on the Council's reserves as at the end of last year, and a projection as to how they'll look moving forward. So section 3 of the paper provides you with some background and explains that we feel it's good practice to have a reserve strategy in place. And it also explains why we can hold reserves, namely that it's money that's earmarked for identified expenditure which may occur over the short, medium or longer term. Section 4 then specifically explains that it's the responsibility of the Section 95 officer, and in the case of the Council, it's the Executive Director of Finance and Corporate, to advise Council on the level of reserves and to confirm that we have a clear protocol on why we hold reserves. Table 1 in Section 4.3 details the usable reserves then at the end of the last financial year, and it shows that all but 13 million of the Council's total reserves of 133 million are committed, and that this balance of 13 is the only unearmarked amount held for unforeseen circumstances. It's not available for routine activities. Section 4.3 specifically notes that 69 million of these monies are held for future budget strategies over the coming years. The bullets at the bottom of page 106 explain some of the reasons why we have these monies in terms of the budget strategy reserves particularly, and we'd look to use these to manage the budget gap over the next few years. And this approach has been approved through committee, so whenever we brought these proposals to members, we've explained how we would use the reserves over the years and how they would be reinstated, and allows us to manage our budget gap on a planned basis. Finally, in section 4.6, we note the other reserves, including HRA and capital funds. Section 5 then goes on to set out a strategy for each reserve. The uncommitted general fund in section 5.6 is the 13 million I referred to before. This balance equates to around about 1.4% of our overall spend budget for the current year, and it's intended that we continue with a risk-based approach to setting that reserve rather than a finite or an absolute value, and we will look to review that on an annual basis. As members are aware, we do not rely on reserves to fund spend without a clear plan in place. Section 5.8 notes the position on the earmarked reserve and highlights the make-up of this total fund of £96 million. Again, the main part being the monies held for budget strategies. As is normal practice, I'm noting that any additions to these funds would be subject to member approval, and they will review the balance annually. Section 5.9 notes the repairs and renewals fund, and then further on we've got the insurance fund and the capital fund position. Again, noting that these are all committed funds, and again noting that any addition to these funds would be subject to members' approval. And you'll recognise that when we come to members with the probable outturn report, and again at the end of the financial year, where we seek approval to put monies into these reserves for specific purposes. The final fund then is the HRA reserve, and that's completely ring-fenced for activities relating to the housing stock. Moving on to section 6 then, it notes the anticipated use of these reserves across the coming years based on best information at the time of writing. So we've tried to project how we expect to use these. So the budget strategy element is fairly clear cut. Some of the others are dependent on how resources would plan specific projects and specific areas of work, but they're based on best information at the time of writing. The main movement, as you can see in the appendix, is the use of reserves, again, in terms of the Council's revenue budget strategy, because that's substantial amounts of money, and that mainly relates to the use of reserves that we've built up following the implementation of the service concession arrangements or the loans fund review as we had previously. As I say, they're quite chunky amounts of money, but they're all planned and how we would use them over the coming years. The table in Appendix 1 shows you that all reserves are committed, except the unearmarked uncommitted general fund balance of the 13 million. I'm looking then to refer members back to the recommendations section 2, please, and ask that the detail on the reserves and their balance at the end of 23-24 is noted, that the strategy for each of the reserves, as I've talked you through in relation to section 5, is also noted, and that the planned use of reserves across the coming years in Appendix 1 is noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Do we have any comments or questions? Oh, I see no comments or questions. Can we agree to note this report? Thank you. And moving on to annual procurement report 23-24, that's pages 113 to 170. And can I pass this to you, Craig? Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. So the report provides committee with the annual procurement report for 2023-24. In terms of the background, it just explains that the Procurement Reform Act requires contracting authorities to prepare and publish an annual report on its procurement activities, and that this report essentially fulfils that requirement. 4.1 it details what the annual report must include, and that is courtesy of the requirements of the Act. Section 2 provides an update in respect of the related activity for the last financial year. 196 contracts awarded over £50,000 in value, a total value of just under 316 million. That compares to 169 contracts the same period in the previous financial year. Section 3 covers the procurement compliance. The highlight report, highlights actions completed in 23-24. That includes improved levels of local spend, the efficiencies delivered by the procured spend review, and also implementation of new community benefit monitoring software. Moving on to paragraph 4.4 in section 4 of the report, this covers community wealth building and also community benefits. It notes there at 4.4.1 how local spend improved from 18% in 2022-23 to 19.5% in 23-24. That represents £67 million of spend with local enterprises. In respect of community benefits, we have commitments from 31 contracts, and they too are detailed within the report attached as an appendix. Moving on to 4.5, this covers sustainable procurement and also supported businesses, and it's noted at 4.52, the contractual activity with supported business and social enterprises, including Haven Products, Hey Girls, and also Scotland's bravest manufacturing company. Section 6 covers future planning. This includes a summary of those related procurements we expected to award over the next 2 years. That includes both renewals and also new contracts, and that's in Appendix 3 of the report. So over the coming 2 years, there's a significant volume of projects. That includes some high-value construction activity, IT, and economic development projects, and also continuing phases of the various education and social care longer-term procured service arrangements. Moving on to 4.7, and this relates to section 7 within the report, and this information is not prescribed in the statute. However, we have got a number of areas here to highlight. That includes local and SME spend analysis, payables, and also e-invoicing performance for 23-24. And just to highlight 475, in 23-24, £70 million of spend is directed to South Lanarkshire companies through the participation within Scotland Excel frameworks. That's increased from 62 million from the previous year. The full annual report is attached at the appendix for noting for committee's interest and also publication thereafter. And I have to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. Do we have any comments or questions? No comments or questions. Can I just say this is a huge report, Craig. Thank you very much for that. Can we agree to note this report? Thank you. And moving on to update of the Finance and Corporate Resources Risk Register and Risk Control Panel, which is page 171 to 188 in your pack. And it's back to you, please, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. So the report gives an update to committee on the Resource Risk Register and the control actions. Section 3 covers the background and highlights the Council's risk management strategy, promotes consideration of risk in service delivery, planning and also in decision-making processes. And a key part of that is the preparation of a risk register, and this comes to committee on an annual basis. The purpose of that register is to ensure the resource is fully aware of its top risks. These risks are prioritised and also that controls are in place to either eliminate or minimise the impact of the risks. The resource then scores these risks in accordance with a scoring mechanism based on both likelihood and also impact. Moving on to section 5, and this highlights the work that's been undertaken by the Resource Risk Group to finalise the review of the Resource Risk Register and also the main changes. Those changes are summarised at 5.5, and there are 3 very new high risks that have been added. The first one being the inheriting of commercial and viable shopping centres due to financial failure of existing owners' management companies, resulting in liabilities transferring to the council. The council fails to comply with its statutory duties by not conducting sufficiently robust impact assessments. And the third one there is in relation to not meeting the expected standards of scrutiny. I'd also highlight the risk score for fraud, theft, organised crime and cyber attacks increased from 12 to 20. And that really reflects the fact that the threat landscape is still considered to be very active at the moment and also shows no sign of easing. The residual score in respect of lack of capacity and skills to meet increased service demands, that's increased from 9 to 12 in light of a shift in supply demand for officers and also the recruitment challenges currently being experienced. So at 5.6 we have risk scores between 15 to 25 considered to be very high risk, those between 8 to 12 considered to be high. And Appendix 2 provides a comparison of the risk scores for 23 and 24 and also details any changes in risk descriptions. Section 6 covers insurance hotspots and claim mitigation for the resource, with no insurance hotspots identified for ourselves. Section 7 covers horizon scanning. There are 3 areas covered here. In a sense, this highlights areas that could pose potential threats or risks or considered to be emerging issues. The first one being in relation to transformational change, the second a Scotland Excel supply chain intelligence report, and the third one there of interest is around artificial intelligence. Section 8 covers the scope and appetite for risk, acknowledges the Council aims to be risk embracing. And then at Table 1, detail just below 8.4, that shows the resource heat map. So it details the total number of risks for each individual residual risk score. So 8.5, just acknowledging the risk profile at Table 2 is it with the ideal universal risk exposure. This exposure is considered reasonable given the number of high-level risks currently being faced by the resource. Section 9 updates in terms of activity taking place on addressing the risk control actions. And then moving on to Section 12, that gives a summary in respect to the review of the risk management strategy that's been completed over the past few months, and that confirms no fundamental changes to the strategy. And this strategy will take effect from April next year. And if I can refer committee back to the recommendations in the report, in Section 2, the content of the Resource Risk Register following review, Appendix 1 be noted, and also noting the outstanding risk control actions will be progressed by relevant officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig. Do we have any comments or questions regarding this report? No, I don't see any. Can we agree to note the report? Thank you. I have no items of urgent business, and I'd like to thank you all for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed. Have a nice day. Thank you.